Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and I am coming at you with a sci-fi reading vlog. I am incredibly excited for this vlog. I have quite a few sci-fi books lined up for it that I have been wanting to read for ages. I will say some of the books I have planned for this video are a little bit older books, so you've probably read them, you've probably heard of them, but nonetheless, I have never read them and I am super excited to read them. The first book that we are going to kick off this video with is The Humans by Matt Haig. Now this book also has a little bit of dark humor in it. I am almost 60 pages into it so far and I am very much enjoying this. So this book was originally published in like the early 2010s, so maybe like 2011, 2012, I believe. So it's a little bit of an older book, but this book follows an alien who is disguised as a Cambridge professor, and he is here to research the human race. He is here for a specific reason that we have already figured out in the book, or at least we've figured out some bits and pieces as to why he is here. He becomes fascinated with the human race, and so far I'm enjoying this book. I really loved the preface of this. So the alien is telling the story and he's reflecting on his time here on Earth and among the humans. It's really funny. So we start when he is naked in the middle of the road in a human body and he is figuring out life, and it's really hilarious. One other really funny thing is once he is on Earth for the very first time in human form as this Cambridge professor and he's in the middle of the road naked, then he runs away and he ends up in a gas station, a Taxico, which is so funny. And he is flipping through some of the magazines, and the first magazine he picks up is a Cosmopolitan, and I am already deceased laughing on the ground so incredibly hard. I really love when he's trying to like eat human food or he's drinking things and he's just like, this is not what I'm used to. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's really funny. It's really quirky. I feel like the author is doing a great job of having an alien overanalyze everything that humans do. You know, things that we do every day. It is kind of funny to see, you know, somebody else's perspective on the things that we do every day, like eating, or this Cambridge professor was married. And so now that the alien is in this Cambridge professor's body, he is having to be this man, this person that he is not. So his wife makes him a sandwich and he's like, why would she like make me a sandwich? This is so weird. You know, just little things like that that I find funny. He is really like critically looking at the human race and becoming really fascinated with it and asking questions that it's interesting. It's not necessarily saying his wife making a sandwich, we need to like overanalyze that or anything, but I do think that it really puts a lot of questions that what we do as humans into perspective. And if there was an all-knowing eyeball just watching over us asking those same questions, it's like, why do they do the things they do? It's like, this is a very valid point, honestly. This is the first book that is going to be in this vlog, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. I am so incredibly excited to read some sci-fi. I don't own a lot of sci-fi, so most of the books I'm going to be showing you guys are going to be library books. I have two other books that are ready at the library, but I am trying to finish this book so then I can go get those books and return this one, so I only have to make one trip. Hopefully in the next couple of days I can finish this book, then I can bebop on over to the library and pick up the other two books. I will introduce the next book in the vlog in the next update and also give you guys my star rating on this guy. I have a couple of updates for you guys. I did end up finishing The Humans by Matt Haig. It took me a little while to kind of come to terms with how I felt about this book. I was pretty indecisive. It wasn't a terrible book by any means. My main thing that when I finished that book, I closed it and I was like, okay, I just read a book, I guess. It wasn't anything where I felt really compelled or inspired by the book or that it was just terrible and I wasn't having a great time. It was none of those feelings. It was really just a neutral feeling where I enjoyed it. I had fun. I laughed at some points. I kind of cringed at some points. Overall, I had a decent time. I think that Matt Haig really does a great job with having humor and some dark humor in his books. The other book I've read from him is The Midnight Library, and this book was definitely, I think, a lot more lighthearted. I don't know where I feel like this book sits. It kind of feels like a 3.5 star, but then sometimes I feel like it's a 4 star. I think that the writing was great. I really enjoyed the characters, and I think that Matt Haig did a great job when the alien was on Earth, and the certain questions that the alien would ask about, well, why do humans do things like this? Or there was a certain part in here when he confessed to his wife about something and he was very nonchalant about whatever it was that was going on. Of course, it was something that was not okay to do to your partner. How confused he was. The main character was so confused about, well, how come you can do this with your wife, but only with your wife, and you can't do this with other people? I think that Matt Haig did a great job with having those questions asked and answered, and I think putting humans to the test. Do I think that this was a bittersweet story? Absolutely. I think that there was a lot in this book that would speak to a lot of people. One part in this that I thought was a very valid point was the main character not understanding why people worked 5 days a week and were stressed out 5 days a week, but then they only had 2 fun days, but then one of those 2 fun days weren't really a fun day because the next day was Monday, and then you spent the whole day of your supposed fun day thinking about the next day, which was going to start your 5-day series of stressful days. Then he posed a question, well, why don't we have 5 fun days and then 2 stress days, 2 days to work? Why is it the other way around? And I think that those are great questions. It's normal for people to have a Monday through Friday 9-to-5 job. I think that it poses a question, well, why is that the normal? And so I really enjoyed how Matt Haig did present those current issues. Even though this book was written, what, 10, 12 years ago? I mean, these are still questions that I even ask nowadays. Like, I could not imagine working a 9-to-5, even though I've applied to 9-to-5 jobs in my lifetime. And sometimes that does sound a little appealing versus working a non-traditional job. But still, I think that these are really solid questions, and Matt Haig makes a great solid argument. And I think that the ending of this story and how our main character chose to go about with his life was a brilliant story, and it made sense throughout the story. I think that it was realistic in its own way, even though it's a story about an alien coming to Earth in a human form, and he was here to perform a task, and then he started to feel for the humans here. I understand the ending and how we got to the ending. It was a bittersweet ending, I will admit. While I wouldn't say it was the ending I wanted, it was still a hopeful ending. Matt Haig left those little strings, didn't completely tie it all up in a really pretty red bow, because he wanted us to draw our own conclusions, and he wanted us to really resonate with that, with how the ending is realistic with people, and that, it doesn't just end. The book didn't just end. You could draw your own conclusions. So I really did appreciate this book, and I think the more I've talked about it with you guys, it will probably be a 4-star, but I feel like over time it might drop down to a 3.5. I don't think it's going to be a book that I will think about for years and years and years, but who knows? I thought that same way about The Midnight Library, and I still think fondly of that book. Who knows? Maybe that is how Matt Haig's storytelling is and how he writes his stories. Overall, I enjoyed it. I did end up reading and starting another book. It is Annihilation by, I almost called him John, by Jeff Vandermeer. I am about 58% of the way through with this book. When I dropped off the humans to the library, I ended up picking up this book. The librarian had asked me if I enjoyed that book, and I was like, I mean, yeah, come see, come saw, I guess. This book follows a group of scientists. There are 4 women. There's an anthropologist, a surveyor, a psychologist, and then our narrator, which is the biologist. And there is this area that came out of nowhere. It's called Area X. It's been cut off by the rest of the world for decades. Nature has reclaimed the last vestiges of human civilization. The first expedition returned with reports of a pristine, Edenic landscape. The second expedition ended in mass suicide. The third in a hail of gunfire as its members turned on one another. The members of the 11th expedition returned as shadows of their former selves, and within weeks all died of aggressive cancer. And this is the start of a trilogy called the Southern Reach trilogy. And Southern Reach is like this organization tackling and monitoring and sending the groups of the different types of expeditions into Area X. This story follows our group that I talked about earlier, and their mission is to map the terrain, record all of their observations of the surroundings and of each other, and above all, avoid being contaminated by Area X itself. They arrive expecting the unexpected, and Area text delivers. But it's the surprises that came across the border with them and the secrets the expedition members are keeping from one another that change everything. I am also following along with the audiobook. It's the same audiobook narrator that narrates the Hunger Games, all 3 of those books, which I thought was interesting. I enjoy that narrator's voice, so it was nice and comforting to have her telling this story. How do I feel about the story? So far, it's interesting. It has very interesting chapters, if that's what you would call them. There's only, or parts, I guess. There's only like 5 parts. And so the first part is called O1 Initiation. And then the next part is O2 Integration. And then there's 3 more. It's an interesting setup for this story. It's an interesting format. I don't know how I feel about the formatting. I am also intrigued so far, and I won't be spoiling anything for you, but I feel like our characters are a little dull. I feel like our main character is a little bland. Not that I'm not enjoying the story, I'm just listening to it. It's a little confusing, and I don't know if that's like its intention. You know, I don't know if the book is intended to be a little confusing, if our narrator is supposed to be a little unreliable, because there's been several things that have been happening, and there was also another pretty big reveal that she had been keeping from us, the readers. And so then when she told us that, it's like, I don't know if we can trust you. I don't know, like, you definitely have your own intentions and you're not sharing them with the audience or, you know, the other people in your group. The other 3 women in her expedition are also a little shifty. I don't know how I feel about it. It's okay so far. And I don't know if that's just like with me with sci-fis. Maybe I am okay with sci-fi. It's not the genre I'm absolutely in love with. I don't know, man. I feel like that's pretty much all I have to say about this book, is that I find it interesting. I feel like the formatting is interesting. The characters are odd, and I'm having a difficult time connecting with them or really caring when certain things are happening. There is a pretty big mystery in here that they have been following around for a little while, and that I am interested in. I would like to know how that, and hopefully I get an answer in this book. I watched the movie called Annihilation that I thought was loosely based off of the book, and I'll be totally honest, they don't feel like they align at all. But it's also been probably since I watched the movie called Annihilation in theaters that I have watched it. But there are bits and pieces in here that I feel like were on the big screen, but other than that, I feel like they're like 2 totally different entities. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's been so long since I have watched the movie. That was my stomach growling. Since I have watched the movie to get the correlations. I always feel like you can't judge a book by its movie, so I'm just gonna leave that there and not expect much more with the connections, because I also feel like the movie did not have really good ratings. That's this so far. I do want to say I love this cover. This was the first cover that I saw of this, and then when I got the audiobook has this cover, and I will say I do like this cover too. I am a fan of both of the covers for this book. With my experience being kind of feeling middle of the road at the moment, it hasn't made me want to DNF this book or to not continue with the series by any means. I have in fact added the next audiobook to my TBR on the Libby app. So far I'm feeling like I could continue with this series. I think it's just going to be a book or a series that I just put on in the background as I'm doing other things, and that's how I've been sort of listening to this. I was sitting down tandem reading this until I felt like I got a little bored, and I was like, okay, I need to do other things, and I'll listen to it and see if maybe I can get a little bit further into this book or into the story. That is all I have to say about this one so far. The next update I give you guys will be my star rating for this book, and then I'll introduce the next book in the vlog. I just got my hair done today, and it's the only time it's ever curled, so I felt like it would have been a nice time to update you guys with everything that's been going on. I feel like these last couple of weeks, I say couple, I think it's only been maybe 9 days since I started this vlog, but it has turned into a very busy, chaotic week and a half. Definitely a lot of things haven't gone as expected. I have not been able to read quite as much as I wanted to, or I haven't really had as much free time as I thought that I'd have for these last 9-ish days. I have been struggling a little bit mentally because I have so much to do, and I feel like I haven't really been able to balance it all out. I'm usually a pretty good person where I have a good work life and school balance. It feels a little chaotic right now. And all of that to say that I did finish reading Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, but I have not started reading another book. But I want to talk about my experience reading Annihilation. It has been about a week since I read that book. I didn't want to grab the camera and talk about this book until I had a chance to write out my thoughts, give you guys a star rating, and feel okay about where I stand with this book. This book here, I love this cover, by the way. I'm gonna put another cover up on the screen, and this was what the cover was of the audiobook on Libby, and I actually really do like both of these covers. I tried to pick one that I thought I liked more, but honestly I enjoy both of these covers, so I couldn't decide which one I enjoyed the most. But I think it's upside down. See, that's my life right now. I had a hard time rating this book. It is relatively short. It's about a 6-hour long audio book, and I listened to it at 1.5 speed. I didn't know how I felt about it as I was reading this book. I stopped the book after some moments, be like, what did I just listen to? What is going on? Where are we going here? And I had to do that quite a few times just to make sure I was understanding what was going on. At some of the points in here when I was listening to it and I wasn't tandem reading, I needed to be tandem reading. So I would stop the audiobook and stop what I was doing. If I was like cleaning, I would go to the book and then follow along for a little bit until I got back on track. My point of mentioning all of that is this was a very odd, interesting, and confusing read for me. It took me a while to figure out what I was going to rate this book. At first I didn't know what I wanted to rate it, so what I decided to do was just write out all of my thoughts, you know, put it all out on the page, see and talk about some of the things that I liked, some of the things that I didn't like. After I wrote all of that stuff out, I felt a lot better, and it took me probably about 5 days to gather my thoughts because this book left me so conflicted. To jump out the gate, I will say I'm giving it 3 stars, which is not a bad rating at all. After I wrote out all of my thoughts, I discovered that there were some things in here that I really did like, some things I discovered about my tastes in reading, and some things that I didn't like, some things I don't particularly care for. We're going to talk about all of that. Overall, this book was a weird one. It was confusing. I think that was kind of the point of this story. I do think there was that little bit of mystery and that part in the story where you have to trust the process. The thing with me when it comes to my reading experiences is I sometimes have a hard time with books that are like this. Sometimes it's hit for me, sometimes it's miss. Another book that I'm going to say that was kind of a miss for me, that was not necessarily similar genre or similar situations, but where I had a hard time following the story and I ultimately ended up DNFing it, was Catch You on a Word, Looking Glass Sound. I didn't like that story because of the way that that story was told with my tastes in reading. So while I obviously read this whole book and I didn't DNF it, there were parts in this that did save me from feeling like I need to stop reading or I need to put this book down. At no point did I ever feel that way with this book because I was so intrigued and I was confused about things, but we were given enough little seeds throughout the story to make me want to keep reading and to keep me interested. And that, I know I mentioned another book and that may have been a little confusing, but my point with that is sometimes stories that have an odd storytelling or have where it's like trust the process until the very end, sometimes those stories don't work for me. And I wanted to talk about Looking Glass Sound as an example of it not working for me. Another slight thing that may have altered my reading experience is I did watch the movie Annihilation when it came out in 2011. I think believe I only ever watched it that one time in theaters when it came out, and it's been what, 15 years, 14 years? And there were certain parts in the movie that I remembered, and I remembered at the time that it was based off of a book. However, it is stated that that movie is very loosely based off of the book, and I would absolutely agree on that. There's not a lot of parallels between the two, but this is not a book to movie adaptation review. This is me maybe perhaps going in with different expectations, or expecting certain things that happened on screen that I thought I was maybe going to get in the book and I didn't, and that may have thrown me off a little bit with my reading experience. Even though I thought the movie was okay, like the movie was strange, a little weird. I got those same vibes from the book, and that part I do think that they did very well, was creating the creepy atmosphere and making like this unknown area, which was Area X, be very spooky and be very horror-esque. The only way I feel like I can describe this, and this is what I did love about the world building, you drained the ocean, but you kept all the animals in the ocean, and then you put yourself in there, and it's like an entirely different world with similar animals that we have here. That was the vibes that I got, and I liked that. I thought that was really cool. I definitely think it was intentionally supposed to be weird. What I loved about the story is I enjoyed our narrator. I wasn't sure how I felt about her at first, but I love a very good, untrustworthy narrator. That is something that I very much enjoy. I love when I'm following a main character and I'm like, can I trust you? Can I trust what you're telling me right now? I enjoy stories like that. That's one thing I really loved about Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. With this book, I found our main character very mysterious, very untrustworthy, but a very much like realistic person. And I felt that same way about the other 3 women that were also in there with her. They were all scientists, and their main objective with going into Area X was to just document what they see, just collect data. And I liked that. I loved how this expedition was going to be a little bit different than the expeditions in the past. And one amazing thing that I think the author did extremely well with Annihilation was not giving us the names of the characters. I loved that added depth in the character development, in the world building. I thought that was a great choice in storytelling because it made you want to know these characters. The Southern Reach, they were the organization that funded these expeditions going in there. Southern Reach did not want the characters to know each other's real names to form some types of attachment, and that I really, really loved about the story. Me as the reader also wanting to know these people's names because I wanted to cheer them on, because I wanted the best in this situation for them. I wanted to know their names, and so I loved that part of this. And I also loved our main character that we never really, I don't think we ever figured out what her name was either. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think we ever knew her name. I found that very unique. I'm trying to think of a book that I've read where we don't find out the names of our main characters. I know one of my all-time favorite movies is like that, The Polar Express. And I loved it because I found like it was a really creative way to try to not get attached to the characters. And it felt very realistic that the Southern Reach was just like, the 4 of you are going in here, don't get attached because you could potentially die, or the person next to you could potentially die. And we also don't want you guys to create feelings for each other, or, you know, put the mission at risk or anything like that. So I loved that aspect of the story. This organization, Southern Reach, was shady AF. I don't trust them. I think that our main character really did a great job of making us feel like, hey, this organization is weird and shady, and I don't think they're telling everybody the truth. The way this book ends, I enjoyed this ending. I loved this ending. I think that the ending is what needed to happen, and I loved this ending so much that I kid you not. When I finished this, I immediately downloaded the second book in the series, which is Authority, I think. I haven't started it, unfortunately, and I do have intentions of continuing with this series, and it's going to be something that's very nonchalant. I read the synopsis of book 2, and I definitely think it's something that I am going to be interested in. One other thing I did enjoy about this story was the parallels with our main character's relationship with her husband and what is going on inside Area X, and how we got the flashbacks with her and her husband and their relationship, and then also her relationship with biology and the ecosystem and how she came to become a biologist. I enjoyed seeing that. I enjoyed seeing her past, how she contemplated the guilt that she had, and how she felt like this expedition was to right wrongs in her life, and that I really did enjoy. Okay, so now I want to talk about the things that I didn't exactly care for. I really just didn't know what was going on. I don't think it was necessarily to do with the writing style. I think that that was the intention of the author. I think it was supposed to be, what the heck is going on? Like, what is all of this stuff? And of course, like, we're figuring it out with our main character of like her environment, the world around her, while there could potentially be hidden things that she can't see that could be acting on her. I understand that that was probably part of the book. Part of the story was we really just don't know what's happening because we're following our main character. So if she doesn't know, then we're not gonna know. I feel like my biggest thing that I didn't quite care for, and I did talk about this a little bit when I was talking about Looking Glass Sound by Katrin Award, I am sometimes not the best audience for that meandery, clueless, mystery, just confused type of storytelling, and that can honestly be something that frustrates me so much that I don't want to keep going. But overall, I think the book was fine. Clearly, it intrigued me enough to download book 2. I won't be reading book 2 for this vlog, but if I do end up at some point in time reading book 2 and it doesn't get vlogged for whatever reason, I do talk about every single book that I read within a quarter in my quarterly wrap-ups. So if you're curious about my thoughts with continuing with this series, definitely stay tuned. If I get to it by the end of March, it will definitely be posted in April for my thoughts on that. I gave this book 3 stars, like I said, and this update has been entirely too long. I don't have another update for you. I haven't started another sci-fi book. I really just haven't had a chance to. I have a couple in mind to start next, but I don't think I'm going to come back and give you guys an update until I am about halfway through that book, so we have some stuff to chat about. I will give you the update when I decide between the 2 books that I am debating between to read. I finished the 3rd and final book for this video. My plan was to read like 50% of the next book and then introduce it and talk about it, like give the synopsis and my feelings like halfway through. This book I ended up going with is so incredibly short, and I read it in a single sitting, so I didn't feel the need to give you guys a halfway point update. But the book that I did end up reading for this vlog is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. And this book, oh my gosh, I loved it. Let's just jump out the gate and say I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. Honestly, the more it sits with me, it might be a 4.5 star read. I mostly read the audiobook. A few points in time when I was listening to the audiobook that I had to pause it, pull the book out, and then actually like read what was going on with my eyeballs. I don't want to say that it was because anything in the book confused me or I was like, wait, what happened? No spoilers, but there was one part where there were 3 characters that were talking. The book had said he reached to shake their hands and do an introduction, but then took his hand back and then said something. I only had to pull the book out to be like, wait, who was the person that extended his hand and then retracted it and then said those words? I know that's extremely vague. If you haven't read this book, it might not make sense. And if you have read the book, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about either. But I got just a smidge confused because I was like, I need to know who this person was. And then there was another similar part a little bit later where I had to do a similar thing. I don't chalk that up to that being the book. I chalk that up to myself because I was cleaning and doing some other things when I was listening to the audiobook. So I think that for those certain moments, that was totally on me. So this book is broken up into, I think it was 6 parts, and you follow 5 or 6 different characters over the course of like 1912 to like 2200 or something like that. There are some time bending elements in here. I loved this concept. I felt like this book was incredibly refreshing. It was very unique, and I love time travel. I think it's really fascinating, and when it's done so well, it just is top tier for me. While I absolutely do love it, I think when I compare it to other books that are 5-star reads for me, it doesn't hit that mark. And I don't really know if I can explain why. I don't think it had anything to do with the storytelling. I don't think it had anything to do with the writing style or the characters. I felt like even though this book was very short, all of the characters were really fleshed out. The plot was amazing, and I really loved how creative that this author was with some of those twists and turns and, you know, those big plot reveals. I loved them. I had a lot of fun with this book. This was very cozy. It was very whimsical. It was really calming. I can see myself rereading this book in the future because I just adored it. And I think that the author did a really great job of creating that atmosphere of, even though, you know, there's time travel and there's high stakes in this, we're figuring it out with the characters as we go through time. I think that the author still does a great job of creating that sense of calm, like the tranquility. Like seriously, we really see a side of humanity that makes me happy. And I think that the author did a really great job of talking about that and of presenting humanity and like allowing us to see humanity from a lens over time. And I really think that this author did such a great job with the different timelines, with us traveling through time and vamping it up a little bit, making it be the futuristic timelines, making them be possible timelines for nowadays. I think it was so well done. I think that this is a story that will stay with me for a while. I read it at the beginning of the week. It's currently Thursday, and I finished this on Monday, I think. So I let it sit with me for a little while before I came over here and just chatted about it with you guys. I think that this was a great way to close out this vlog. I do think that if you haven't read this book, you definitely should. There are some conversations in here about pandemics and of course altering timelines, and we get into the nitty-gritty of that. I think that this really does have great conversations about all of those topics. I think that they are handled very, very well. This book reminded me of How High We Go in the Dark by, I cannot remember the author's name who wrote that, but I'm gonna put that on the screen. This book is a lot more like graphic and a lot more heavy hitting and depressing. You really have to be in the right mindset, I feel like, for this book, but I loved this book. I think that this one does a really great job with having similar conversations, but it's not so bleak and it's not so hard hitting. Let me know how your reading is going. Let me know if you've read any really cool sci-fi books. Leave me any recommendations down below in the comments. But thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.